the skeletal crowd. So we were just wondering whether we should have a discussion among ourselves. But so I think post lunch sessions are always difficult, but hopefully it'll make it a little interesting for you folks. Let me start with a simple question. How many of you would honestly say that you know the difference between classical AI or discriminative AI as it's known and generative AI? Let's have a show of hands. Yeah, yeah, please. You put up your hand, right? Yeah, okay. And I saw him put up the hand, the guy who was handling the video. So I said, wow, he knows it. Yeah.
He uses it for sure.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's very true. So, in fact, I think for the last 6, 7 years or so, or maybe even I would dare say about 7, 8 years, we have been talking about AI. And just when we thought that we had wrapped our head around it and understood it sufficiently, had enough of case applications or use cases, whether it's recommendation engines, whether it is simple search, and a lot of mature kind of applications in the enterprise too, and a lot of money was being put by investors. Then suddenly in December 2022, we had ChatGPT, which became the face of generative AI, garnered something like 100 million users in just 2 months. And today, OpenAI is valued at what, $100 billion plus, and 180.5 million users, I think, and still counting. I think the estimate is something like 500 million users by 2025. I don't know whether we'll reach that number or not. Difficult to say. But talking about classical AI and generative AI, classical AI, as we all, I mean, most of us would perhaps know that it you should take inputs, make predictions on that data with classifications. Whether now, say for instance, you have a cat and a dog, so you label it and you call it a cat or dog. Here you can generate with generative AI, you can generate a cat or generate a dog. That's the simplest example that I would give. I'm trying to dumb it down, but I know that you all are seasoned people, so you all know the difference between the two. I have some numbers with me, of course. A part of the reason we have the big daddy models, whether it is the LLMs, the large language models, the large multimodal models, the LMMs, and even the small language models, which are then fine tuned and used by many companies. Of course, we have all the big companies like whether it is OpenAI, GPT-4, Sora. I think everybody has played around with it to some extent. Then, of course, you have Llama, Claude 3, and Grok. Elon Musk doesn't stop grokking about it. So we have a lot of fun going on. But the interesting part is even Microsoft, it has a 49% stake in OpenAI, has now taken the entire team of Inflection. That's Mustafa Suleyman, and I would recommend reading that book, The Coming Wave, of Mustafa Suleyman, if you have not already read it. It's an excellent book. Of course, even I have written the small little books, shameless plug, AI Rising, but there's nothing to do. It can't hold a candle. Uh, but talking about investments, the US and China are way ahead in the AI race. And I was looking at some of the numbers. So a report jointly released by KPMG and China's ZGC Industry, according to them, US and China account for almost 50% of the world's 36,000 AI companies. Of course, the UK, India, and Canada come next. But India is way behind. I think with just something like India has invested $8 billion in 296 startups. And if you look at some Excel numbers, I think 60% of new unicorns created over the last 12 months are Gen AI native. 2024, according to all the discussions that I had with most of the senior folks in the industry, is all about scaling up the Gen AI pilots into the major kind of thing. But is this really happening on ground? As of now, we all know that most of the Gen AI companies that we are seeing, at least in the popular imagination or what is being written about mostly, are those companies which are running these rule chatbots, and they're converting them to LLM based chatbots. So this is one example. The second example would be those like using it for marketing campaigns and using it for other enterprise things. Banks are also using it nowadays by fine tuning those large models and even smaller, the SLMs also, and using them for domain specific applications. But more interestingly, a lot of chat around the Deshi LLM, the India LLMs. I think as of now, last count, it was around 10. Including Krutrim and Code over Bharat GPT. The Bharat GPT program also, which is with 7 IITs and two triple IITs and a company called Vizi. So, and interesting names. Sarvam has Open Hathi series. Uh, AI for Bharat has Airavat. Then Bharat GPT has Hanuman. So it's pretty jingoistic at this point in time, but I think interesting stuff that we're doing at this point in time. But the fact remains that about 40% of all enterprise applications will have used generative AI by end of 2024, according to Gartner. Um, I think more important than that is when we look at this ecosystem, which is why we are having this topic today. We find in the ecosystem, we find the government, we find the VCs, we find entrepreneurs, and the industry bodies. Now, if you look at the government, as far as AI policy is concerned, I think all of you would have heard about that the government has sanctioned something like 10,000 crore, and they're talking about having 10,000 GPUs. Yota has already signed a deal with Nvidia for something like 4,000 GPUs to start with, and 60,000 to come in later. Other companies will follow, and then you also have some industry body participation, a part of Bharat GPT, the program which is backed by NASCOM and Reliance Industries. And then you have some other smaller projects also. But when you talk about the VCs, this is where exactly you all are important members of this community and the founders. So, of course, if you all do not loosen your purse strings, nothing is going to happen. So, a lot of private investment is needed in that. And so, therefore, without much ado, Nita, let me put this question to you. Finding a lot of, Gen AI is moving at an incredible pace. Very hard for any one investor or any founder, for that matter of fact, entrepreneur, to keep pace with the kind of developments that are there. Foundation models tomorrow can are big, huge platforms, and overnight they could make many of these entrepreneurs redundant if the founders are just building a layer atop these foundation models. So, in this particular case, what when you look at your portfolio companies, what is prompting you to invest in these portfolio companies? What is the kind of Gen AI outlook that you have at this point?
So we see several, waves of technology. We were talking about how like the Gartner hype cycle itself has like several different forms of frontier technologies that are being tracked. For us, Gen AI right now in India, we see a few things that hold us back as an ecosystem. One, we don't have that systemic investment over decades that everyone from academic institutions, the military to the governments have made into very core, deep, research in this field. Second, very, very specialized talent exists, but in very small
I'll
numbers.
just interrupt over here because I would like you to come up first with the opportunities because you're already touching on the challenges, which I think
Yeah,
there'll be
I think
plenty.
the context is there. See, for us, whenever we see a gold rush, we immediately reach for the pickaxes. So we're definitely looking at infrastructure plays here, new forms of data silos that can be made available to train some of these newer models. Because to all of the things that we talk about bias and discriminatory, like essentially amplifying bias within the data that is used to train these models, like India just as a giant missing hole in most of the data sets that NFIR models are trained on. So we look at all of that, right? So we're not looking at we're obviously seeking foundational models. We're trying to see if someone is doing something really innovative there. But the wrappers, we're very careful about not investing in. One very big thing that you alluded to, besides the folks with the foundational models themselves trying to disrupt the companies, we're also concerned about how enterprises in this wave of technology have an ability. I don't mean the incumbents like Google and big tech. I mean any enterprise that sits on their own sort of like that owns their own distribution, owns their own data, might, and we're seeing this, then come to market much faster with solutions that in a week the solutions they come up with kill like 10 startups or startup ideas. So we're very cautious, very optimistic, very cautious to see what exactly can be built here, and very happy investing in the pickaxes, whether it is literally like like on the semiconductors front, like actual infra, or actually different layers in between.
Any specific examples that you can give from maybe from your own portfolio?
Unfortunately, none live yet, like because a lot of these investments are under, under process, and we haven't publicly disclosed them. But we've seen companies across our portfolio leverage this in a big way. So we have Dozy, which does contactless blood pressure sensing and beyond. That is leveraging like AI and generative AI in very very interesting ways. We see all of our consumer companies leveraging this to build their own currently products for their own use and then eventually commercialize it outside. So across our portfolio, we're seeing that sort of leap towards this technology. But as far as the new investments are concerned, not able to like we just recently invested in a like a gallium nitride, sort of manufacturer out of India, team out of here. So it's some very very interesting deep tech stuff. That's
All in the stealth mode.
no, not stealth. We haven't announced the investment yet.
Fair enough. Pearl, the same question to you.
No, as Nritya said, this is a segment that we are tracking very closely. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. This is a segment that we are tracking very closely. There are a lot of innovation that we have seen come up. Of course, some that hold more merit than others. So definitely cautious, but I just sort of break it down a little bit around how we look at it. There are three layers that we are seeing. The first is, of course, foundational layer, which is the very basic of LLMs on which everything else is getting built. As Leslie was saying, that in India we don't have a lot of talent that is actually building out foundational models today. Foundational models also require large data sets. Data sets have to be extracted, hosted for a long time. Synthetic data has to be added on top of that to actually make the LLM work. So extremely cautious of taking any bets there. Also, things are moving so fast at the LLM level that what really works for different applications in the long run, we're not able to put our fingers on that right now. The second layer for us is more middleware, which is where we are very excited as well. And you're actually seeing companies come up in India that are building for that layer. That layer would be anything that makes your LLMs better, vertical compression of model. Let's say like a chat, a GPT-3 or 4 takes 130, 150 billion parameters. But if you're building something in the fintech space, you only need 5 billion parameters. So why spend that much time and cost around it? Just compress your model. Cybersecurity around it, RAG improvement, and so on and so forth. And the final layer, which is where we are seeing most of the applications come up, is the use cases. While there have been innovation on the use case side, it is a little bit less depth. It's a little bit less deep, or I would say a bit of fluff on top. So there for us, what's really important is that before being AI first, are you really solving for something? In the long run, you're going to become a SaaS play with an AI angle on it, and you'll trade anywhere around 5 to 10x where SaaS is trading. So are you really creating a use case that somebody is buying? And through this use case, are you reducing costs, increasing efficiency, making the output much better? If you're able to justify that, then we go ahead and take a bet. So far, we have done two. In fact, our first bet in the AI space was even before ChatGPT, I think September of 2022, when people weren't necessarily talking about generative AI as a concept. There was a team out of Wharton, a researcher that had been working on some knowledge graphs for a very long time. And there, what we really liked was, of course, they were using LLM to be able to streamline how BFSI and fintech companies could answer to their customers. But the way they were extracting from the knowledge graph was truly unique, where it wasn't just text, it was audio, video, multimodal, and this was back then as well, which has now enabled them to get multiple large clients such as Prudentia, they have Angel One, and multiple others. So we sort of look for those unique features and things that they can bring to be able to monetize, not just create a solution.
Interesting that you say that, because this reminds me of how many Gen AI or AI startups have actually clicked in India. I think the current count is about 113 unicorns as of now overall. We at one point in time we used to keep track of it here, but as far as AI unicorns are concerned, I think it would only be two. One is of course Fractal Analytics. The second is the native Gen AI one, Krutrim, Bhavish Agarwal's own investment. Vivek, you come from that founder thing where the aspiration, I do not know whether you aspire to be a unicorn or much, much more than that. My wishes with you on that part of it. But you're the doer part of it. You're the investors put in the money. We are the skeptics who keep on pointing, picking holes in all the business models. But you are the people who are actually, furthering this ecosystem. And you're doing a lot of interesting things. You're leveraging AI and ML using sight, sound, speech, NLP, pattern recognition, etc. And you're already moving many of your AI to Gen AI solution. So you could just tell us some of the opportunities and what's clicking with you.
Yeah, hi. Is this audible?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for having me here. So just, I mean, I kind of maybe simplify what are the various categories of use cases that we are seeing. We've been in this space for about 10 years now, and started the company with the intent of building AI first solutions for our customers. So, I mean, over the last 10 years, we've done over 2,000 projects that leverage the modern tech stack, and with the advent of Gen AI, a lot of boost has been added to uh, how companies are looking at the opportunity of transforming themselves with AI, right? So largely, if I was to classify the use cases that we are working on, the first would be content retrieval. So, and I'll give an example in each situation, an example or two. So, large telecom company wants to enable their field technicians about solving simple problems, like how to fix a router, as an example, in one of their consumers' homes. And the challenge is that fixing a router is not a technically very difficult thing, but enabling the workforce is actually the challenge, right? So using generative AI to search through the technical manuals and answer the questions is bringing huge amount of productivity to a company which is, let's say, $100 billion plus in size, right? So I would say that this is the low hanging fruit type of a use case, but it works really well, right? I would say a more complicated use case would be how do you search through disparate clinical trial information and uh, get great efficiencies, like I mean reduce 40 weeks to 12 weeks for creating a clinical trial protocol, right? In For a drug manufacturer, that can seriously accelerate the whole drug, discovery process, as an example, right? So content retrieval is one set of use cases. Content generation is another set of use cases. I think this is what all of us fell in love with ChatGPT for, right? Write a question and it'll create a big speech for you. And I used it for our annual kickoff, which happened 2 days after ChatGPT made Gen AI go GA. So and that's what I was saying, that the guy who's taking the video is probably using it and doesn't know it. So content generation is, and I mean media, text. These are only very easily understandable examples, and they are happening all the time. The third category of use cases is where it's like for tech services, it's doctor having to take his own medicine type of a situation, right? So bringing efficiency in coding, as an example, of bringing efficiency in creating technology systems is a very interesting use case that is emerging. I mean, it's also very close to us at home, because over the next 3 to 5 years, it will uh, change the unit economics of the large technology services ecosystem that exists in the country. Right? So it impacts 6 to 10 million people, and could really change the environment in which they work, the skill set they need to bring, what they need to learn, and all of those things. Right? So that's a very interesting use case. Um, we have seen projects where large data migration jobs from legacy databases to cloud native databases using generative AI based code refactoring as an example have brought in 35 to 40%, you know, benefit and acceleration and stuff like that. So that's another set of use cases. And then, of course, conversational interfaces or consumer interfaces, right? I mean, your refrigerator um, showing you a picture of the ingredients inside is passe, but now your refrigerator telling you what are the three things that interesting things that you can make with those ingredients is generative AI for you, right? So, very, very interesting use cases that are coming up, and I mean, at this point, we are really having fun with working on all kinds of things.
Hopefully, you'll also have a refrigerator talk in Bhojpuri. That should be interesting, I think so. So of course, I mean, you alluded to the kind of the use cases that you had, but also there are, I mean, as we were just talking even before the discussion started, that there are many challenges around Gen AI because the technology is not proven. I mean, there are a lot of now hallucination, of course, is one of the most highlighted. Now some call it even a feature. Now they have started, AI, the creative way of putting it, that it's also a feature, a bug, and humans hallucinate, which is also true. But at the same time, the fact remains that hallucinations in enterprises may prove a little expensive. And then, of course, there's plagiarism, there's copyright violation, there are IP trademark violations, infringements that can cost a lot. So it's not a proven technology. Within your particular case, when you're mentoring, advising your portfolio clients, when you're looking at them, when they come up to you, what are the kind of challenges that you see them facing, and how do you address them as a VC?
So I think I actually did some in the early days when AI was being built out, worked with my student years in the AI bias lab, and that's been something that I've held very close to my heart. So one of the biggest pieces of advice, especially in healthcare or consumer, etc., is just being acutely aware that specific populations, specific ethnicities, etc., have been completely missing in the data sets that a lot of our models have been trained on. So almost like having the AI that behaves is difficult because the data sets that they're trained on were just inherently racist. For instance, I don't know if you knew this, but until a few decades ago, clinical research in healthcare didn't mandate needing women or women of any men of any other color but white, right? So if you today go to a GP and you're having a heart attack as a woman, you probably will get misdiagnosed because the way it presents in a woman is completely different from how it presents in a 6-foot white male. So drug dosages, all of these things. So I have always been very terrified about taking decisions on incomplete data sets, and now we have something that really magnifies it. So one of the big pieces that not just evaluate founder, like I think when you're coming there, it's important. It's too much to put a burden on a founder. We're reviewing at the point at seed that, oh, you should solve for all of this and be mindful of it. But hey, are you already thinking about this? That's a very, very important thing for us as we sort of look through the kinds of founders that we invest in. Like, are you aware? Are you hyper critical of like what your technologies should and should not be utilized for, and what its misgivings would be because of for all of these reasons, right? Like all of the policies. But yeah, so just generally skeptical of folks who are very kumbaya about this tech because I think there are specific use cases that it's incredible for, but massive shortcomings if in its current state we leverage it for very deep decisioning.
That may also necessitate kind of a pivot if necessary.
Yeah.
Pearl, same question. How do you guide them to become responsible AI or Gen AI startups?
Yeah, no, that was a very good point that Nritya made. We recently came across a company that I'd like to share. These guys were building a solution for the US market. Readmission is a big problem in the US. A lot of hospitals have started to bear anywhere around 15 to 20 million per annum only through readmissions. All you have to do is just make sure that the customer or the patient knows what are the procedures that they need to follow once they leave the hospital and what doses they need to take afterwards to be able to reduce that cost. So this solution was sort of building for that market. But in this, it's also important that they don't end up taking liability. So large chunk of our analysis and our due diligence went in sort of looking into the tech, understanding what were the data sets that they had incorporated to be able to sort of guide the patients once they leave, and at what point, more importantly, should a nurse or a healthcare staff be called so that any sort of liability is prevented. And those are things that one needs to sort of start thinking about even when they're developing a solution, as opposed to when a situation arises and then they have to take care of it. So we definitely focus quite a bit on it during our due diligence, guide founders in that direction, and also make sure that any liability or anything that tech is not supposed to be doing doesn't get done by the platform. There is a human that gets involved and they take care of it. That is more around how do you really build a solution with some guardrails. But at the same time, there are certain challenges in tech that today we cannot solve. Like hallucination is a big one. How vector DB is actually structured defines how much hallucination you have, which at some point you can solve while building, but it'll take time. So there we make sure that we actually have a connect in the US, and we work very closely with some of the accelerators and some of the innovators that are coming up in the US to make sure there is a constant flow of information back and forth. Today, gone are the days where it takes months or years for an innovation to move from the west to the east. Everything happens simultaneously today. So that's another way to do it. But generally, I would say that founders have to be cognizant of it and continue to sort of innovate, continue to stay on top of what's happening, and keep their models innovative or rather agile enough that they can incorporate anything that is coming out.
So basically, keeping humans in the loop, having agile models, and being collaborative. Vivek, you have touched on some of the challenges, so I won't repeat it. I think most of the challenges revolve around these issues. But what if you could list three kind of important things that founders should keep in mind when launching these Gen AI startups and interacting with VCs.
So I would say that maybe I'll just call out the one which stands out in my head. The most important is to identify the use cases that really create value, right? The there is the one thing about AI in general and generative AI even more is that there is a lot to solve. Okay, some of it may not really be adding any value, right? It solves a problem, but who wants to solve it, right? So solving what matters is actually an important thing. So as a founder, I think investing a lot of time in figuring out what is the problem you want to go after is because I think the technology has become simpler. I mean, it has the challenges, and I think it will evolve through it. But access to the technology, ability to implement it, a lot of those things have become simpler, right? And that makes it very enticing to go and solve a problem. But I think as a founder, you have to be true to yourself whether what you're solving is important.
I actually have a couple of questions, but first I'd like to take a couple of questions from the audience.
No, I think I'd like to get both views, the investor view and the founder view on this one. So a lot of optimism on the panel around Gen AI, and I think I share that optimism. Just maybe putting on the risk hat a little bit. So you see the benefits, but you also see things like deep fakes and a lot of other things, and we are realizing that even sort of heads of countries are not immune from things like this. So just trying to understand, and also regulation is lagging behind, and I think globally it's trying to catch up in different countries. But on the flip side, there's a lot of optimism from the investor lens on betting on Gen AI, and there was a lot of sort of predictions on possible use cases where it can create value and so on. So just trying to understand from your perspective, when regulation does sort of catch up, and I think globally everyone's recognizing it's going to need to catch up very quickly, what is the risk of making some of these bets, and is it likely that some of this will may not be allowed to play out when regulation catches up?
And both from an innovation perspective, from a founder's perspective, how does that look, and from an investor's perspective in terms of making sure that your value and your returns are sort of protected. How are you viewing it as well?
Well,
So, regulatory and policy risk is not unique, obviously, to AI.
crypto case is a classic.
Yeah, exactly. So, for instance, we didn't invest in anything in crypto. We did invest in a couple of blockchain slash sort of Web3 companies, and that's a place that we understood. But I think the dialogue with policymakers and understanding how and which side of this we stand is not as opaque as it used to be. It's quite dynamic. It's an ongoing dialogue with industry, and if you listen hard enough, you actually know where things will land as far as that is concerned. So when you're talking about risk about investments, that's something that, like, if you plug in deep enough into, like, speaking to folks like himself and speaking to policymakers, etc., you don't just know how they're thinking about it, but you're able to inform how the industry should be governed into the future. But right at the bat, when none of this exists, none of the frameworks exist to be able to make these decisions, we have to put our own guardrails in place, and we do this across industries, and AI is no different. And it's just a matter of very deep research, understanding where we draw the line, what we will allow and not, and building those frameworks and informing our companies as well on how they can operate within these guardrails. The other thing is, like, in all new sunrise sectors like this, we particularly look for founders who are very adaptable, right? Your entire business model could evaporate tomorrow, but, like, at the core of it, like, do you have tech that translates into other use cases? So that's how we think about risk. But you're right, like, there are certain spaces, certain obvious cases, like right now even, that we can anticipate of this being, like, misused. We put the guardrails in very, very actively. Like, this is so particularly at 314, we have a governance, business integrity, and a regulatory officer is one of the partners who sits on the core investment committee, including me, like, who brings in, like, how the world is thinking about these things, and our investment teams that define what we invest in. So it's our responsibility to put some of these guardrails very proactively in the early stages in particular.
I think Nritya has covered quite a bit. I'll just add one point. For us, when there aren't a lot of regulations around the sunrise sector, it's really important to just understand what is the intent of a regulator. Regulator wants to protect consumer, wants to make sure that enterprises behave ethically. So whenever we evaluate anything, that's how we sort of look at it. That is this solution doing something that is either unethical, or is there a potential that this can harm consumer in the long run? And that sort of solves for certain things in the initial days.
You want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I would say self-regulation is an important thing. I mean, we have a complete framework around responsible AI. I mean, we had it even before Gen AI was real. So, it has 8 well-defined facets. We talk and write a lot about it. We implement it in every stage of our development process. We certify our solutions on each of these facets and work with our customers, because large enterprises are also very concerned, right? There is a mix of FOMO and fear, about doing it as well as not doing it. So, we walk them through the journey as much as it is understood today, and that's what it is. I mean, I think you have to really self-govern.
On the side of caution, it's better. Given that you get a lot of flip-flops on the part of the government, also policies.
I just want to add that a lot of the regulatory, you can almost feel like there is a race to kind of publish regulations, right? The moment US says something, the next day Europe will say it, and then vice versa. India is kind of also in the ring on that. One of the things that is unique to generative AI, and part of it is because, and I think it helps that data was very colonized in a way, is that every country is trying to do their own, so there is a bit of a country race also about just creating their own stuff, right? Because the value of this is no longer based on how much oil is there under your ground, right? It's just how much innovation can you do based on the technology. So regulation is also partly trying to
it will require another panel discussion. Please.
Thanks so much for your thoughts. piggybacking off of that thought, how do you view LLMs, the international use of LLMs versus like the ones that are being built in India based on India data sets? Like I think Bharat AI is built off of GPT-3 and
Other GPT.
yeah. So how do you kind of view that, and what's your opinion on that moving forward?
You know this.
I can see about 8 to 10 being developed at this point in time. In fact, I wrote a very long cover story on this. So my thing is that it's a good step. It's a much needed step because India has about 400 languages and thousands of dialects. So clearly, it is the need of the hour. Having said that, the challenge, of course, lies in the quality of data sets. Now, I still remember when I spoke to Amitabh Nag of Bhashni, he told me that okay, the cost of developing these data sets was something in the order of something like $6 to $7 million. Now, that's not a small sum, but there are certain companies that are already using the data, they're annotating it, and the approaches are different. So, for instance, if you look at Krutrim and if you look at Project Indus by Tech Mahindra, these two companies are creating or are claiming to create these Deshi LLMs from scratch. Um, I would take it with a little dose of skepticism because of the lack of GPUs at this point in time. Because it requires very, very heavy computing power. So Vivek or any investor will tell you the kind of power that you require to run. Not so much for inferencing, but yes, for running, for training the models, which is the first step at this point in time, which is why NVIDIA has an 80% market share, clearly. The second part would be the quality of data sets. It sucks. Even I mean, I do not know whether this is on the record or off the record kind of stuff, but there are certain things off the record. Maybe we can have a conversation on it. But the quality of data sets is wanting clearly, and that any person using an LLM or training the LLMs would say that it is hard. So they have to actually go out to the villages, get these data annotated, and so it is going on as it. And I'm not discounting the fact that there's this project Vani that is going on simultaneously and different. So there are those kind of different things. Then other ones are the LLM based chatbots that are happening at this point in time. And the Bharat GPT program, which is with 7 IITs and 2 IIITs and backed by Reliance Industries and NASCOM, etc., that is in its infancy. They are talking about a 40 billion parameter Hanuman series, which is supposed to be a kind of a foundation model for India.
Should it matter as a VC firm? Should it matter if the data set is international, based on an international model versus on Indian data?
Yeah, but that's the big problem, which I think anybody will tell you. That's the major issue out here, because if you cannot rely on on a foundation model that has trained 60% of it has been trained on English language. So that's the major issue out here. So most of those foundation models are of no use, and that's I think the major challenge is that any person trying to build a LLM is creating. LLM based chatbots probably are easier. One more question.
I'm just asking, sorry, just on that, how much are we betting on, as you said, the foundational models which are English based are not really useful. So the alternative on the other side of it, how much are we betting or how much attention is there on non-English or whatever the requirements are? Like, is there a market? Are we using it?
I mean, yes, short answer. I think just from other consumption sort of bets we've taken, whether it's LLM or not, like you're seeing consumption very dramatically shift outside just urban Indian centers into tier 2, tier 3 and beyond. There is a very hungry need to sort of consume content, communicate on the internet in the language that you express yourself and not just the language you were trained in, which is English. We're seeing this across other things. So that's a broader macro fact that you can't really deny anymore. And that's why, hence the need, right? So if you really want to sort of help scale it, but do we need to do it right away? Like, can it wait until we have better data sets? I don't think we really have an option in that. Like, we do need far better data sets and like more, and some of the sources could be these consumer tech
startups that are building for these consumers, they could be real sources of this. But the short answer is yes, there is a market.
If you look at the Ask Disha LLM based chatbot, which IR that Railways uses, it works. I mean, I tried it out. It's a good start, I would say.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So my question is to either of you can answer. So government is also coming up with various initiatives. They are thinking to help the market, help the ecosystem.
You can hear me?
Yeah. So they are in a way trying to help the market, help the ecosystem build, like how they're saying Bharat AI, etc. So will it be a threat to many other startups that are trying to create businesses in these areas, and government or biggies like Reliance, etc., can jump in and create, like, crash the entire business model that they are building for years?
My view is that a lot of what the government is doing requires more capital than what startups are currently raising at the early stages. So, in fact, there is a collaborative approach that is required from large conglomerates, industries, governments, to a large extent, even from institutions, where they are partaking to come in and provide the different peripheral, I would say solutions or peripheral infrastructure that is required to build that out, and then startups can come on top and actually start to build out. So, for example, I mean, if you would like to create a Punjabi chatbot, audio and down the line video as well, how do you do it unless you don't have collaborative approach from across institutions to bring that data to be able to train it and to sort of take it forward?
Of course. I would have continued this, but before we just end, just one very quickly, in just one line. What can we do, to increase the role of female startup founders and VCs in India? So this is
In India, overall.
okay overall. Let's talk about it. But
More women in VC would help more female founders.
what
get
should be
funded.
done?
What should be done to get more women in VC? It's things like this, like getting the women who do have check writing power into a room, like to strategize how we bring on and mentor more young women, help women move from the lower levels within firms into leadership more actively, and to have not just a mentoring but a very deep coaching and sponsoring relationship with them. So that's
Pearl, quickly.
If I may say that off the record, I would say have unconscious bias removed from recommendations and referrals that are given. I have done over 8 referrals of women founders in the last 1 year, and I'm sorry to say none were void of unconscious bias.
A man's perspective.
I think, undoubtedly, there is a lot of great work already happening, which is led by women. At Quantify, we have a complete non-discrimination policy, and we have half of our leadership is led by women. So, if one thing that could be
Vivek is being politically
potentially, a quick win could be just to get enough noise around the work that's being led by women. I think, and maybe there is some bias why it doesn't have that much noise, but that could be one.
So, folks, thank you very much for this engaging conversation. Please give the panelists a big hand. Thank you.
I would like to invite Rochelle D'Souza, Managing Director at Lighthouse Funds, to give our esteemed panelists a note of thanks.
One photograph. Group.
Thank you.